You felt it start again this week, didn't you? Not the whole thing all at once. Just the first move of it. A text that came in softer than the last 10. A memory that surfaced out of nowhere while you were doing something completely unrelated, standing in line, driving, half asleep. A pull in your chest toward reaching out, toward checking, toward doing the thing you swore to yourself 3 weeks ago you were done doing. And underneath the pull, a very quiet, very tired voice, and you said, "Here we go again. You know this shape. You have lived this shape more than once. Distance, then a small opening, then hope rushing in before you can stop it, then the same wall showing up in almost the same place it showed up last time. You have watched yourself walk this exact loop before, and some part of you is standing outside your own life right now, watching it start to happen again, wondering if this is the time it finally goes somewhere different, or the time it just repeats one more time. If you have been noticing the pattern repeating this week, the same opening, the same hope, the same wall, leave a like and subscribe so you do not lose this thread. Drop the words, "I see the pattern now," in the comments below. Because what I am about to walk you through is not another description of the cycle. It is the actual mechanism underneath it, and the one thing that has the power to interrupt it for good. This is not a story about being stuck with someone who does not care. It never was. The pattern repeats precisely because something real keeps happening inside it over and over. And until you understand what that something is, you will keep finding yourself back at the beginning of the loop, no matter how many times you promise yourself you will not. Right now, before we go any further, I want to put something in front of you. Every lap around this loop costs you something. Weeks decoding a silence instead of living your own life. Nights guessing whether this return means anything or whether it is just the pattern again. You have already paid that price more times than you can count. The Twin Flame Union personal reading looks directly at both your charts and shows you what is actually keeping this specific cycle turning and where it is truly headed. Not a generic stage description. Yours. If you're done interpreting this alone, the link is in the description below. Okay, let us get back to what is actually happening here. Here is what nobody tells you about this specific pattern. It is not random. It is not simply two people who keep almost finding their way to each other and keep almost losing it again. It has a shape, and the shape repeats because the shape is doing something for both of you, something neither of you would ever say out loud because neither of you has consciously noticed it yet. The cycle goes like this. Distance builds until it becomes unbearable for one of you. Contact returns and it feels enormous because it arrives right at the point where the nervous system has been starved of it the longest. The relief of that contact gets coded as proof. Proof that the connection is real, proof that it was never actually over, proof that this time might be different. And for a while, it is different because early contact after distance always feels different. It feels like arrival. Then the same old friction resurfaces, the same fear, the same withdrawal, and the distance builds again, and somewhere in the middle of that second stretch of silence, the whole cycle quietly resets itself, waiting for the next opening. You could probably map your own version of this loop on paper if someone asked you to right now. The exact number of days silence usually lasts before it breaks. The specific kind of message that tends to arrive first, small and low stakes, testing the water before anything real gets said. The particular window afterwards, sometimes a few days, sometimes closer to 2 weeks, when things feel almost normal, almost easy, before the old tension creeps back in and the whole thing tightens again. You have lived this shape enough times to know its rhythm the way you know a song you have heard too many times to actually hear anymore. This is trauma bonding, and I want to be precise about what that term actually means because it gets thrown around loosely in this community, and most of the time it gets used to imply something ugly, something shameful, something that means you are broken or naive. That is not what is happening here. Trauma bonding, in the clinical sense that researchers like Patrick Carnes first mapped out, describes a bond that forms specifically under conditions of intermittent reinforcement combined with high emotional stakes. Intermittent reinforcement means the reward, in this case, connection, closeness, contact, does not arrive on a predictable schedule. It arrives unpredictably, sometimes after a short gap, sometimes after a long one. And that unpredictability is precisely what makes the bonds stronger, not weaker. Behavioral research going back decades has shown that unpredictable reward schedules create the deepest, most persistent attachment of all. Deeper than reward that arrives reliably every single time. Your nervous system is not weak for staying hooked into this. It is responding exactly the way any nervous system responds to a pattern built this way. Every time contact returns after distance, your brain releases a flood of dopamine, the neurochemical tied to anticipation and reward, and that flood is larger precisely because the wait made it larger. The longer the silence, the bigger the surge when it breaks. This is why the return always feels more intense than the actual present moment logically justifies. Your body is not overreacting to who he is being right now. Your body is reacting to the entire arc of tension and release the loop has built. This is also why the good stretches, the ones right after contact returns, feel almost euphoric in a way that steady, uneventful love rarely does. Steady love does not produce the same chemical spike, because steady love does not require a period of deprivation first. That does not mean steady love is less real. It means your nervous system has been trained, through repetition, to associate a very specific kind of chemical intensity with proof of connection, and it will keep chasing that intensity even in situations where a calmer, more consistent form of the same love is quietly available and simply does not register the same way yet. And this is the part that matters most, the part that changes everything once you actually see it. The pattern is not happening because he keeps choosing to hurt you or because you keep choosing to be hurt. The pattern is happening because neither of you has yet built what would allow contact to exist without it having to travel through this specific arc of distance and desperate return. That is not a character flaw. That is an unbuilt structure. And unbuilt structures can be built. If you are the divine feminine reading this, here is what has probably been true for you inside every version of this loop so far. You are the one who notices the pattern first. You are the one lying awake doing the math on how many days it has been. Whether this silence is the normal length or an alarming one. Whether the last message meant what you hope it meant, or whether you are reading meaning into something that was never there. This vigilance is exhausting in a way that is hard to explain to people who have not lived inside a connection like this one. It is not that you are constantly upset. It is that some low-frequency part of your attention is always monitoring. You've probably noticed the way your own body starts anticipating the pattern before your mind catches up. A certain restlessness that shows up right around the point in the cycle where contact usually returns, as if some part of you has learned the schedule even though the schedule was never actually fixed. You check your phone a little more in those windows. You find yourself replaying the last real conversation you had, looking for clues you may have missed. None of this makes you desperate. It makes you a person whose nervous system has been trained, through repetition, to stay alert for a signal it cannot control the timing of. And here is the harder truth. Part of you has started to associate the ache of the waiting with the realness of the connection. If it did not hurt this much, would it even matter this much? If the longing were not this intense, would the bond even be real? This is one of the cruelest tricks trauma bonding plays on the nervous system. It teaches you, slowly, without your permission, to read the depth of your suffering as evidence of the depth of the love. They are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. But inside a loop built on intermittent reinforcement, they start to feel identical because the nervous system cannot always tell the difference between intensity that comes from love and intensity that comes from unpredictability. You are not addicted to him. I want to say that clearly, because that language gets used carelessly in this space and it is not accurate and it does you a disservice. You are responding in a completely normal, completely human way to a structure that has been built on unpredictable return. The structure is the problem, not your heart, not your capacity to love, not some flaw in how deeply you feel things. Now for what is happening on his side of this, because the pattern does not repeat only because of what you bring to it. He is inside the same loop, experiencing his own version of it, and his version has its own particular shape. For him, the pullback towards you after distance often arrives disguised as clarity. He pulls away, the space gives him relief from the intensity, and inside that relief, he starts to convince himself the distance is working, that this is what he actually wants, that maybe this connection was too much all along. And then something happens, a memory, a dream, a moment where your name crosses his mind at an hour that feels significant, and the certainty he built during the distance cracks. He reaches back not because he has resolved anything internally, but because the ache of not reaching became larger than his fear of reaching. This reach is genuine. I want to be clear about that because a lot of content in this space tells the divine feminine that his return is manipulation or game playing, and in a trauma bond it almost never is. It is closer to a pressure valve releasing. He genuinely misses you, genuinely feels pulled, genuinely means it in the moment he reaches out. What he has not yet done is build the internal capacity to stay reached out, to tolerate the ongoing exposure of consistent closeness instead of the high-intensity spike of intermittent return. Consistency, for a nervous system that has learned to associate love with unpredictability, can actually feel more threatening than distance does. This sounds backward until you understand what his system has been trained to expect. There is often a specific moment you can almost feel from your side of the connection, even without words for it, where his certainty about the distance starts to crack. Something small breaks through, a piece of music, a place that reminds him of you, a conversation with someone else that circles back to you without his meaning it to. In that moment, the version of him who built a case for staying away runs directly into the version of him who never stopped missing you, and for a while both versions are true at once, which is exactly the kind of tension that eventually pushes him back toward contact. He is not choosing chaos over you. He is choosing the pattern his nervous system currently recognizes as survivable. Distance he understands, return he understands, briefly in bursts. What he has not yet built is a structure that could hold sustained, unspectacular, everyday closeness without some part of him needing to retreat from the intensity of it. If you have felt yourself standing at your own kitchen counter, or lying in bed running through every version of the cycle you have lived through, wondering if you are simply someone who keeps ending up in the same place, no matter what you do differently, I want to interrupt that thought for a moment. You are not failing to learn the lesson. You have been living inside a structure that was never designed to teach the lesson on its own. Awareness of a pattern is necessary, but awareness alone does not dismantle intermittent reinforcement. Something else has to change, something structural, and most people trying to work through a connection like this one are only given tools for managing the emotional experience of the loop, never tools for actually tracking whether the loop itself is loosening its grip over time. That is usually the missing piece. Not more insight into why it hurts. A way to actually see in front of you in black and white whether each pass through this pattern is shorter, less intense, less consuming than the one before it, or whether you are simply repeating the exact same loop without realizing no real movement is happening underneath it. The Twin Flame Journey Tracker and Progress Workbook exists for exactly this gap. It gives you an actual month-by-month record of the stages you are moving through, a place to log the synchronicities and the openings so you stop losing track of them the moment the next wave of distance arrives, and a way to finally answer the question that trauma bonding makes almost impossible to answer from inside the loop itself, which is simply this: is this actually moving, or does it only feel like movement because the intensity keeps convincing me something is happening? So here's the part you actually came for. What breaks this? Not distance. You have already tried distance, probably more than once, and you know by now that distance alone does not dissolve a trauma bond. It only pauses it, resetting the loop so the next return hits with even more force than the last one. Distance is not the answer. Neither is intensity, throwing yourself harder into the connection during the good stretches. trying to make the closeness so undeniable that the pattern cannot repeat itself again. That does not work either, because intensity is the very fuel the pattern runs on. What actually breaks a trauma bond is the introduction of a third option the nervous system has not yet been offered. Not distance, not desperate closeness. A third thing, which is steady, low-intensity, consistent presence offered without the emotional spike of either extreme. This is where differentiation becomes essential. The capacity researchers like David Schnarch and Murray Bowen wrote about extensively, the ability to stay connected to another person while remaining fully anchored in your own internal state, neither merging with their withdrawal nor collapsing when they pull away. Differentiation is not detachment. It is not pretending you do not feel the pull. It is staying present to your own steady internal ground even while the old familiar wave of distance and return tries to pull you back into its rhythm. In practice, this looks unglamorous. It looks like noticing the old pull toward checking, toward reaching, toward reading meaning into a silence, and instead of acting from that spike, pausing long enough to let the spike pass through your body before you decide anything. It looks like responding to contact when it comes, warmly, honestly, without overgiving in a rush to make up for the distance, and without withholding to punish him for it either. It looks like letting your own life stay full and structured, and yours, regardless of which phase of the loop you happen to be standing in this week. This is what starts to teach both nervous systems, yours and his, that closeness does not have to be earned through absence, and does not have to be this intense to be real. Real can also be steady. Real can also be quiet. That is often the version of this connection neither of you has actually experienced yet, and it is the version that ends the loop for good, not because either of you tried harder to love correctly, but because the structure holding the old pattern together finally has somewhere else to go. This does not happen in one conversation or one decision. It happens in the accumulation of small moments where you choose steadiness over the old spike, one at a time, often without any dramatic proof that it is working. You will not always be able to tell in the middle of it whether you are actually shifting the pattern or simply managing your reaction to same pattern one more time. That distinction only becomes visible in hindsight, when you look back across weeks instead of days and notice the wall did not go up as high this time, or the silence did not take as long to feel survivable, or the return, when it came, did not sweep you off your center the way it used to. Those are the real signs of movement, quiet ones. The kind that never make for a dramatic story, but the kind that actually means something is finally different underneath. The cycle you are standing in right now does not have to be the whole story. It has been the loudest part of the story so far because loud is what intermittent reinforcement produces. But underneath the noise of it, something steadier has been trying to build the entire time, and it becomes visible the moment you stop mistaking the intensity of the ache for the truth of the bond. Leave a like and hit subscribe if this explained something you have been feeling and could not name. Drop "I see the pattern now" in the comments and tell me how many times you have watched this exact cycle repeat. I read every single comment, and I promise you, you are far from the only one standing inside this loop right now. If you are ready for clarity on where this specific pattern is actually taking you, the link for your Twin Flame Union personal reading is in the description below. Your version of this story deserves more than another lap around the same loop. I will see you in the next one.